Welcome to an organizational analysis of the movie 12 Angry Men. This is a team presentation presented by the Ester team. We are part of the School of Education at Regent University. As we define the organization, we look at the film 12 Angry Men. It's a 12-man jury. They're just cast as jurors 1 through 12. The juror members describe themselves as average, about the same as anyone else. The jury is comprised of men from all walks of life. The story starts with the trial of an accused 18-year-old man on trial for murdering his father. As the juror members go to deliberate, 11 of the 12 immediately seal his fate with a guilty verdict, while juror number 8 challenges this decision, demonstrating his ability to challenge the authority that had already been put in place within that group. This challenge sets off a chain of indecision.
Clampett defines actual culture as representing the way the organization truly behaves. For the jury in 12 Angry Men, there is no established structure or rules, and their poor communication skills see the attempted structures changing multiple times throughout the movie. With these changes, their culture is being affected and is being influenced as well. However, juror number 8 is a prime example that culture can be taught as he stands his ground and tries to motivate the other jurors in understanding what the bottom line is for their goal as jurors. The identity and brand of the organization can be looked at during the preliminary vote and the final verdict vote. During the preliminary, the focus was on making a decision and leaving quickly. Because of this, there was a passive following, and no one was making decisions for themselves. As the movie moves on, we see more of an active following. As juror number 8 establishes he cannot give his vote without a reasonable doubt, he is helping to draw more morals and faith out of the other jurors, with one of them even stating that they think a testimony to put a boy in an electric chair should be accurate. By establishing these faith and morals, they were able to come up with more rules and establish more of their culture throughout. Hofstad's 5 cultural dimensions are as followed. Let's look at power distance first. Power, according to Northouse, is the capacity or potential to influence somebody. In a large power distance cultures, everyone has his or her rightful place in a social hierarchy. However, in this movie, although class is mentioned sometimes, juror number 8 saw all of the jurors as we as viewers did. When people have power, they're able to affect others' beliefs and attitudes or their course of action. Coaches are an example of this that Northouse gives, and juror number 1 in our movie is a coach on a high school baseball team. He was the original one to step up and say something to try and establish a culture that he was ultimately overstepped. As the movie progressed, each of the jurors did come to a mutual understanding that they needed to focus on the child's life at hand and not on their personal lives and where they needed to go after they made the final verdict. Individualism cultures are I-conscious cultures, whereas collective cultures are we-conscious cultures. Although in the preliminary vote, we see an 11-1 cast for guilty votes, each juror has factors outside of the case, Yankee tickets, they're overheated in the room where they're making the vote, that is selfishly affecting how they viewed the case. Juror number 4 notes on how they should not run the process as a contest, racing to reach the goal of determining the status of the boy and his life at hand. Juror number 8 is modeling collectivism as he is thinking beyond himself and focusing on their job as a jury as a whole to come up with a verdict on making a decision for the boy's life.
The jury initially started off as a masculine organization. However, once Juror 8 introduced feminine qualities into the jury, the femininity overpowered the masculinity. Juror 8 explained that he cared how a guilty verdict would affect the defendant's life when he stated, "It's not easy to raise my hand and send a boy off to die without talking about it first." He convinced the jury to have at least a conversation about the case, which ultimately led to a not guilty verdict. Demuth and Hofstede found that people search for truth in uncertain situations. Uncertainty avoidance led the jurors to re examine key pieces of evidence. Upon finding fault in this evidence, the jury drew their own conclusions and decided that the defendant was not guilty based upon the conclusions that they drew. Short term orientation was apparent when Juror 10 inferred that his guilty vote was based on his personal beliefs rather than the evidence presented. However, long term orientation was presented when multiple jurors expressed shame by turning their backs or challenging Juror 10 when he expressed his racist views. Three of Dubrin's organizational politics were most apparent in the jury organization, the first being expert power, followed by negative effectivity, and then lastly a conflict of interest. Juror 8's expertise in architecture allowed him to gain power by sharing his expert knowledge on the traveling time and speed of both the train and the downstairs neighbor. His expert opinion convinced a number of jurors to change their vote from guilty to not guilty. Expert power was the most important of Dubrin's organizational politics because it convinced the most jurors to change their opinions. Clampett's cultural constructs and organizational change. As information is obtained, it will be filtered through the organization's value system, so less important information is filtered out, declared Clampett. As the juror analyzed fact based evidence presented during the trial or by other jurors, they begin to make decisions based on their values and beliefs. This change resulted in a unanimous not guilty verdict. Clampett also found that motivation for the organization depends on its members' ability to believe in their individual actions, the organization's policies, and what the belief of the organization is. Over the course of the film, the jurors begin to realize the impact of their civic responsibility. Through dialogue, the motivation of each jury member changes from wanting to make a hasty decision to respecting the evidence, the judicial process, and the opinion of the other jurors.
The organizational context of 12 Angry Men, according to Dubrin's leader follower communication practices. Juror number one is the jury foreman. As such, he is the initial leader of the organization and all the jury room proceedings, such as organizing the seating arrangements, requesting evidence, monitoring the debate, calling for votes, and presenting the jury's final verdict to the court and judge. He seems reticent to take authority over the other jurors, however, prefacing the proceedings by stating that you fellas can handle this any way that you want to, and that he is not going to make any rules. He is a manager and not necessarily a leader. Later on in the narrative, juror number 8 becomes the leader of the jury by proxy. He displays leadership ability, but more importantly, he uses critical thinking skills to inspire change in the other jurors' opinions. This jury is an example of lateral relations with a few characteristics of downward relations in an organization. The jury members converse, sometimes heatedly, and experience a wide array of emotions from sarcasm and jokes to frustration and anger, psychological projection, and grief. These emotions establish camaraderie, sympathy, and resolution in the organization. Juror number 8, who at first is the only holdout for a non guilty verdict, starts out in the out group in opposition to the 11 jurors, who are the in group. All end up agreeing with his observations and insights, and ultimately result in a cooperative vote of 12 votes for acquittal.
Organizational context, Dubrin's leader-follower communication practices. When people work smoothly together, collaboration is easier to attain. Political tactics for enhancing coworker relations. The jury members engage in interpersonal citizenship behavior, positive coworker exchanges, make small talk, and attempt to repair damages to the crime's narrative and propose answers for the gaps in the key testimony quickly. Political tactics for enhancing team play. Despite the conditions in the room, all jury members contribute to the team culture. Some of them demonstrate positivity and confidence and trust in teammates. Still, some make others feel important, participate in healthy competition, and calm distressed members.
Clampett's communication approaches: arrow, then circuit. The jury foreman indicates that the guilty verdict is a foregone conclusion from the beginning, but Juror 8 throws doubt on that certainty. What was intended to be an arrow communication approach ends up evolving into a circuit approach, with Juror 8 being the circuit breaker and the other jurors making the needed connections. Circuit managers highlight important communication skills such as building strong relationships, managing hidden agendas, and providing constructive feedback. This includes actively listening to one another, showing sensitivity to one another's needs and concerns, and making all members feel included and understood.
In contrast to the other 11 jurors who were almost arrogant in their certainty of the suspect's guilt, juror number 8 had empathy for the teenager on trial, asking the other jurors how they would feel if their mother had died and they lived with an abusive father. Ephesians 4:32 tells us to be kind and compassionate with each other because God forgave us. When a manager offers emotional support, she gets a more cohesive, productive team and ultimately more retention. Juror number 8 also wanted to examine the facts. He said, "I just want to talk." Clampett challenges leaders to avoid falling into common thinking biases. He says to achieve robust decision making, we need to be liberal with thoughtful, sometimes even provocative questions. Juror number 8 definitely challenged the status quo, understanding we need counsel and instruction to make wise decisions, according to Proverbs 19:20. Juror number 8 was also a servant leader in many respects. He practiced gentle, non judgmental argument. He was patient and humble and stuck with his convictions, but he didn't steamroll the other jurors, and he allowed them to express their opinions. And in doing that, he showed them respect. Besides arguing logically, I think he won them over because he remained authentic to the end when he put his coat on juror number 3, his last detractor. And this is reminiscent of Jesus, who loved even those who convicted him to death. 1 Corinthians 13 reminds us that love stands firm, even in hardship. And modeling this kind of positive behavior is infectious, as we saw in the film, because it helps others to practice good organizational citizenship behavior, and it will make your organization more effective.
Applicable organizational and communication principles. Some of the organizational and communication principles highlighted in the movie The 12 Angry Men were upward relations, lateral relations, downward relations, and influence tactics. Throughout the film, jury member number 8 demonstrated building trust and confidence, creating a strong presence, and minimizing being a yes person. He stood on his morals and convictions and did not waver from his stance. Jury members 8 and 9 remained positive throughout, and the foreman exhibited diplomacy through his organizational structure of anonymous voting. Communication between the jurors was face to face, and they strived for open communication, which assisted in coming to a consensus of a not guilty verdict.